Hi, good morning, and welcome to the next tour with
Ian?
and Andia. Today is episode 2, Transition and a Quest. And I'm going to kick it to Ian to introduce our guest.
Yeah, so we are joined here with a very dear friend of mine, Jason J. France. Jay retired out of the Air Force in April 2021, retiring in the rank of Chief Master Sergeant. His final duty station saw him as the Command Senior Enlisted Leader for United States Transportation Command. And if I recall correctly, you were the ranking enlisted member in the United States Air Force for a period of time right before you retired, which is it's pretty epic, as you know, because the Air Force caps our enlisted leaders on how long they can stay in. So that time and grade, time and service piece, you went far beyond that and broke barriers. But today, as you continue on your journey, you do a lot of professional development and you do discussions. And of course, you're an author, and we'll get into your excellent book, 5 Million Steps. And I see it there in the background too. So we really enjoyed reading this book, and we really want to explore your quest and what transition meant to you. So Jay, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been great to have coming up on probably 20 years of friendship and connection. Great to see you all doing awesome things as you have transitioned, Ian and Andia. This is a awesome project. I'm excited for you all to share what will undoubtedly be some great things for transitioning service members and families. Excuse me. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be one of your first guests, as well as want to say thank you to the folks that are listening right now that are tuning into this. I promise that over time on this channel, you guys are going to get some great tidbits, some great things that are going to help you all transition. So thank you all again for having me.
Well, thanks so much. We're super happy that you agreed to be with us because we feel blessed to know you. And like Ian said, we really enjoyed your book. He got your book. And it was, I remember it was like laying on his nightstand, and I said, "Oh, where'd you get that book? What is it? Wait, we know that's Jay France." And he was like, yeah.
One and only.
The one and only. Yeah. He wrote the book, and he was like, and then he got down and he was like, "You should really read this." And I was like, okay. And I'm a voracious reader. I love to read. So yeah. I grabbed it. I got through it very quickly. I loved it. I really loved how you tied this quest that you took on the Pacific Crest Trail to your military life, to your entire life. And I thought it was so compelling and moving. And it took you on such a journey, like not only your Pacific Crest Trail journey, which I get, but like obviously like your journey through your whole entire life. And it was just so moving, and it was such a cool. So honestly, like when we decided to do this, you were like number one. We were like, that definitely needs to be one of our first guests, because we were both really enamored by your book and by your stories in it. So not to like oversell the book, but you haven't read it yet.
Read it. Do so to our guests. Yes.
It's really fantastic. So kind of what motivated you to do this? I mean, for folks that haven't read your book yet, why did you do this, and how did that, sort of culminate in your transition from your military service?
Yeah, first I got to say thanks so much for the kind words, and I'm really glad that you enjoyed the story. And you hit on a couple points here, Andia, that there were things in there that I had never said out loud, and I was a little hesitant to share, to be honest with you. But, hearing the feedback from you all and others, those pieces that I was most hesitant to share seem to be the ones that are resonating the most with folks. So again, I appreciate the very thoughtful feedback and the kind words about the book. But the journey itself, the Pacific Crest Trail, I chose to do that right after I retired for a couple reasons. One was to fulfill a childhood dream. And I do talk about it in the book, but when I was 8 years old, I mean, you can't make these things up. When I was 8 years old, I was, looking through an old school hard copy of National Geographic at my grandmother's house, and we sat there together and read it. And the photos in there, the story, the scope and scale of that as an 8-year-old was just incredible. And I grew up in Washington State, so one of the states that the trail passes through. And I was just blown away. And she was the first one that said, "Hey, I bet you could do that." And that was where it planted the seed when I was 8 years old. So Fast forward 42 years, and I stepped off the stage after a little over 31 years of service, turned 50 the following week, and then started the trail the following week. The big reason for doing it that later on, besides the childhood dream, was I really wanted to step away from what I knew and what I had become comfortable with over a long, long period of service. I knew that I needed some time away from distractions and temptations to grab a job immediately. And I also knew I needed that time and space to really think, to disconnect and think, even though I avoided it a lot on the trail, but to think about where my passions truly were and what direction I wanted to take after I was done with the transition from the military and finished with my hike. So yeah, a lot going on there, but wow, it was an incredible experience, and I'm so glad that I did it.
Wow. And that's incredible. Hearing about how you took a childhood dream and really turned it into reality. I think a lot of folks tend to see that as, really difficult to surmount, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to pull a thread on a couple of things that you mentioned. So you talked about, just doing something that, you wanted to set out to, but in your book, you talk a lot about some adversity, right? Mm-hmm. So going back to 2021, when you did the hike, COVID was still in full swing. The forest fires that were going on. And I know you talk a lot about that in the book. You also talk a bit about, your multiple times seeking to get that Ranger tab and graduating Ranger school, right? So that adversity piece and getting, having that grit, that's something that I think is pretty incredible, right? And if you don't mind kind of, helping me walk through a little bit, that mindset, where did you find that mindset, growing up, and then translating that into, your just untiring and unwavering goals, to get through. And then what do you do with that today? If you don't mind, I think that's a really important piece as far as transition. Where do we get from, the young start in having that iconic sort of, inspiration to be able to do that. And I think that's what really inspired us to want you, as our first guest, because that's a huge thread to pull. So over to you, Jay.
It is. Yeah. And that's a 53-year thread to pull. So I look back and, kind of where, based on the question, the first thing that came to mind is, everyone's got a story, but, a really challenging childhood. I think that's where a lot of that grit started, essentially on my own, very much on my own from a really young age. And there was a period of time, and I talk about it in the book, and I know you're familiar with that, where I had an incident where I got caught taking food from a trash can at school. And it made me feel really, really bad. I even say in there, I've never felt as embarrassed in my life. And I felt bad for myself for a minute, but then I soon realized, even at that age, that, I have a choice of either feeling bad for myself or improving that position and leaning into it and simply just figuring it out. So I think over some reps and sets as a young kiddo, figuring it out and just making things happen became kind of my way. Then transition that into the military. The biggest rewards I learned very early came from overcoming challenging things, whether that's schools, experiences, deployments, all of those tough things, I would say, built my character and my desire to pursue more difficult things, and also that bias for action. Well, to be honest with you, as we thread this through the military, towards the end, I wasn't faced with as much uncertainty or physically and mentally challenging things as I was early in my career. I will never say, especially in my last few leadership positions, I wouldn't say the jobs were easy, because, I had to exercise clear and good judgment. I had to make very impactful decisions that had, positive or negative consequences on a large number of people. But those challenging tasks that I experienced and enjoyed as a young person growing up, those things that built me, I didn't face those as much. I was surrounded by amazing people that prepared me, that poured into me. I would walk into things and I would have a dozen people helping and preparing and making sure that I was ready for those decisions, which was great. But I wasn't faced with much risk or much uncertainty to know what the outcome was going to be. Things became, in some cases, predictable. And again, I enjoyed and loved the people around me that poured into me and supported me and made me look good and helped me make some, very impactful decisions.
Right.
But I really needed something that would kind of dust off that grit piece, something that I couldn't see it far enough in the future to know, because there were so many variables and I was on my own and I didn't have that reach back. I had to face the challenges, a couple that you described there, on the trail, all on my own. And it felt really good to be responsible, 100% responsible for the outcome, to assume 100% of that risk and own every decision that I made out there. And the outcome was, hey, 144 days after I started, I was standing at the northern terminus. And after 2,650 miles of great times, challenging times, and I'll tell you what, it felt great to do something on my own and only to have to rely on myself after so many years of having wonderful people around me, which again, I appreciated it. But man, it felt good to do something on my own again. But thanks for that question.
Yeah, absolutely. So is it, I'm going to pull that thread one little step forward.
Yeah.
So, how do you talk to folks now, that you're 3.5 years post-transition, and over 3 years of completing this quest? How do you use that experience to help guide others in, what you do today, as a motivational speaker, really, and as a leadership development professional?
Yeah, I'm very lucky to, have the roles that I do now. And how I use that is not only those life experiences, those military experiences, the challenges and things that I faced on the trail. It allows me to see in others, potential struggles and things that they might be facing, whether that's something at work, confidence, experiences, those kind of things that I kind of have been fortunate to gain the ability to see in others some of those challenges and to be able to relate to them through those experiences that I had, understanding that everyone's experience is going to be a little bit different. But to be able to sometimes, be that one person for them that they need. Those are the most rewarding things now. And then to have that bit of optimism if somebody is facing some challenges, not in a one-up sense, like, oh, I had it really hard here, but to really be able to hear them a little bit differently, understanding that I have my own sets of challenges that I've overcome, listening to theirs, and then I think asking some of those questions as a coach that allows them a bit of that self-discovery and allows them to realize that they got it. They just haven't maybe realized that potential yet. And then on the military side, in the leadership development that I do, to look through a different lens now, because I am no longer in the military. I no longer have that bit of influence, that little bit of authority, even though I was an enlisted person. Authority is, one of those challenging words. I'm away from that, so we can have a different conversation. I no longer have influence or impact on the careers of folks that I engage with that are still wearing the uniform. And it's great when all of those things, that influence, the position, the rank, all that is stripped away, and they still choose, and I still get to pour into those folks. I still get to establish that relationship when all those other things are stripped away, and get to be that my true authentic self and share with them what I have to offer as Jay, rather than that chief, rather than that Command Senior Enlisted Leader. Those are the things that are the most rewarding, and those are the ways that I leverage those experiences now with the people that I'm privileged to work with.
Oh, that's fantastic. I really appreciate that. And, hearing you talk about being able to have connection with people, find inspiration, that you can pull out of them through relatability, and vulnerability.
Yeah.
And those are big things that I think are hard to do oftentimes in uniform that you've expressed here a little bit. I know that was difficult for me, and I find a lot of that very similarly in what I do today in my role as a civilian now. So kind of on that thread, Andia, did you want to kind of talk about some of the other things there?
Yeah, well, one of the things actually, while you were talking, one of the things I was thinking about is transferability, which I think, I talk to military spouses all the time about this too, right? We have, as far as a veteran goes, you have what you did in the service, and then how do you translate that to being a civilian, potentially working in the civilian space. And then with military spouses, you have a lot of like breaks in employment and, where you're just maybe being the CFO of your house and, taking care of your kids. And, you have all these things that you're doing, but then you have to translate those into skills. And so I guess while you were talking too, you think about the folks that you've mentored and you're coaching, how are you working with them to translate even those things that they are overcoming, that adversity they've faced and they've overcome? Like, how do you help them translate that? Or is that part of what you're doing with them to help them have a successful transition? Like, clearly you have.
It is, and I have the privilege to not only, partner with folks on their transition journey that are in uniform, but I talk to a lot of spouses as well. And I think those where it usually ends up in the conversations is that adaptability, that courage to take chances and explore something new, to take that optimism, that flexibility, that grit that our spouses create over time, and apply that to something that they might be passionate about, or to explore things that they might not have considered before. I think that our military spouses sometimes maybe don't fully realize the mindset that they have created, because they have been, through choice or through assignments that they haven't had a vote on, they have constantly gained those reps and sets in landing on top of a new place with a different job market, maybe different schools for their children, different levels of responsibility that their spouse, their partner, it has to deal with. Oftentimes, I know in my case, my wife, who was also active duty and retired about a year and a half before I did, she was the one that, brought it all together. She was the one that had that sense of, okay, Jay is over here focusing on his responsibilities. She was focusing on her responsibilities as an airman too, but yet at the same time, really, really keeping the family together. And sometimes I believe, even with some of our spouses, they take themselves for granted and don't understand fully what it was and what the value they brought. And then to take those things and to lay that on top of the workplace if they choose to take on work. That adaptability, that flexibility, that grit are all very powerful things that we really can't get trained on. You have to experience that. And I think sometimes, at least in the experience that I have speaking with some military spouses, they often look, and I understand, they often look at the technical aspect of the trade or the craft that they have done, are educated or certified on, sometimes overlooking the fact that their adaptability is strong, their flexibility is strong, their resilience is strong, all of those things that could be applicable in places that maybe they haven't explored yet. I hope I answered that question you had there. That's
absolutely.
Just my observation.
Yeah, no, that I think first of all, you're totally right. Military spouses have a wealth of capability. And I think, I've always been a very big advocate for any military spouse that's interested in entering the workforce or, even, career changing. And I think you hit on all of that as well. It's so important. And man, are we capable and flexible? And do we do the best research ever?
Oh, yeah.
So we know everything about the entire place before we get there. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you also is, and I think we're going to be really exploring this with all of our guests is, one thing about transition that surprised you, because we've found that we thought we were super well prepared, but there were still like the unknown unknowns that we like to talk about. But
Rumsfeld model,
but we were wondering, what was the one thing that really surprised you about transition?
Yeah, and to answer this, I have to level set because I was very fortunate on a few things. I had already secured employment before for a contractor job that has a lot of flexibility in it. I wasn't overly concerned with income right off the bat. The other thing, my wife had retired before I did, and she already had secured income. We did not have to move because we were already established here, and our sons did not have to change schools. We stayed here outside of Scott Air Force Base to allow that. So a lot of the challenges and things that typical military families have to endure and address, I was not faced with that. But the thing I didn't have many of those unknowns that a lot of people face. One of the things that surprised me the most about transition is how well my experience with the VA went. And I know that some folks have had those challenges with them, but what helped and I think contributed to my good experience going through the VA process was the preparation that I put into it. I took action and reached out to several people that had retired before me to get some coaching and mentorship on that. And I got some great advice from folks. So I went in well prepared for my experience with the VA. And I also gave myself the time that I needed. And it doesn't sound greedy to say this, the time that I deserved to give myself to transition, where I see a lot of folks continue to drive right on into the end. Now, there is honor in that. I understand it. I get it. That's what we do. That's what we do right up until the very end. But one of the things that helped me have a good experience across the board, and especially with the VA, was being intentional about that, giving myself time and putting that preparation in. My experience with the VA was great. I know these things are different depending on where you go. But I think what I could control as far as that preparation was the true reason why the experience was good for me. So, I had a positive one.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, that's fantastic. And actually, I mean, you really did as well. So that's fantastic to hear. So my, the second part of this question was, how, and this is different for you because, Monica is, is a veteran. Well, and she went through her own transition, but I guess like, how did you, once you guys were totally done, right? You were transitioned as well. How did you see that affect her? And from your total break now from the military community as far as active service goes, how did that affect her?
Yeah, it was great because, whether it's a military to military relationship, whether it's, one member of the team, being in while the other isn't serving, it really was a matter of no longer was there that responsibility that I had. Oftentimes we had a one stripe rank differential, and although her being far more capable, better leader, better connected with people, I happened to be the one, because of my position, that was driving our assignments and maneuver for many, many years. And her having to go into new assignments, new places that she did not choose, and could have maybe not had the best impact on her potential in her career, we no longer had to deal with that. She no longer had to follow me as I followed the path that the Air Force set for me. So to answer the question, it was a lot more freedom, and we both had the opportunity to make, I would offer, have equal, have equity in the decisions that we made. It wasn't because, hey, the Air Force is sending Jay here that, she has to, figure out where she's going to fit within, the organization where we go. We didn't have to deal with that anymore. The world was ours to decide where we chose to go, not where I was sent and where she had to sometimes follow, if it makes sense how I put that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
A great feeling.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And having, I never had the opportunity to deploy with you, but I did have the opportunity, of course, to deploy with Monica.
Yeah.
And, I can absolutely vouch for what you say. She is an incredibly capable, leader. And, as you mentioned earlier, how she was the one that did all the research, and she's the one that kept the household going. She kept our deployed location going 100%. I can totally vouch for that. And it was truly an honor to be able to go downrange with her. So I guess the last question that I would have you, for you kind of tied to this, you mentioned how the impact on Monica and your boys, was really driven by your career piece. But I think that the thing that I would just kind of like to highlight, again, through your book and that piece through transition is, as you left the uniform, you essentially deployed for 144 days on the Pacific Crest Trail, right?
Yeah.
But I think what was really neat about how you really weaved in a lot of this story and that self-reflection piece to define and really kind of navigate what the next tour for you would be, which is, of course, what you've been doing now for the last 3 years, is staying grounded with the family. And I really loved how you were intentional in, the communication, intentional with, when you had those little breaks and were able to spend some time, and then very intentional about getting back and, then, kind of taking that shower and cleaning it all off and dropping that pack and then devoting your time to your family. That's an incredibly powerful, kind of message. And I think that that's one that I would just like to highlight and say, thanks for continuing to reiterate that. And was that, where you, as you charted out your book, something that was deliberate, or did it just kind of come because that's just who you are? Or was it a little bit of both? I'm just kind of curious about that.
Yeah, it's that's an interesting and a very deep question there. There's, for the experience on the trail, that being away from my family was the most difficult part. What I thought going into it, well, a couple things. One, I was like, hey, what kind of guy, steps away from, his family for what I thought was going to be 6 months right after retiring? Well, my wife called me out. Let's just be honest there. So I had this, dream, and then we started getting close to the time to actually execute it, I felt kind of bad that I was going to be away. So I had the discussion with Monica that was, hey, babe, I think I'm going to do just the Washington section, which is 500 miles to finish in the state where I started my military journey. And she, kind of gave me a look, and she's like, well, why aren't you doing the whole thing? Essentially, she told me to man up. So I was like, okay, this is great. So, message received. So off I go. But then once I started, I thought that those physical, mental challenges were going to be the toughest part of the trail, but it wasn't. It was being away from them. So through communicating, through my satellite inReach, my satellite communicator, through sharing through the YouTube channel I did, the videos every week so they could, see and share a little bit of my experience. They met me halfway. Those things that we did to remain connected were great. Also, what I found interesting in there was, and I talk about it in one of the chapters, was when I would deploy, I would intentionally not think too much about them when I was doing what I needed to do.
Yeah.
And I did feel a little bit bad about that at times, because I was like, hey, I need to stay sharp. I need to stay focused on what it is that I'm doing to get the team that I'm with, to get myself home, to get the mission done. I would, kind of put them in the back of my mind. And at certain times at the end of the day, when I would come back or on a day off, that's when I would focus my time and attention to connecting with them. It might sound a little bit insensitive, but that's what I had to do, again, to stay sharp in those environments. Well, on the trail, I had freestyle option. I could think about them all day, and that hurt a little bit more to be away from them, because I was like, hey, I'm out here where I could be with them. I have the choice now. But, all part of the journey, all part of the things that that make us better, that allowed me to build more gratitude in a different way than I had while wearing a uniform. So yeah, that was a pretty challenging part there. But yeah, then it was about, as soon as I got off the trail, about getting home and reconnecting, and it was great getting back.
Absolutely. Well, that's truly inspiring. I really love that. And, the intentionality aspect of it, and really that message about, keeping that family, as part of your transition plan is certainly powerful. And I really love that.
Yeah.
Well, I think at this point, what we'd like to do is kind of maybe turn to a couple of transition related questions, and then kind of hit our game, since we're about 30 minutes into the recording. So, one of the things we like to ask our guests is, the virtual rucksack, if you will, right? So what's in your rucksack? If there was one item you can, intentionally carried from military to civilian service, what would that be? And it could be anything you want, of course. And then what did you intentionally leave behind?
Yeah. What's in there, I would say, that I've carried is optimism. That ability to, over a long career of ups and downs and challenges and successes, I really look back, and also the influences and the mentors that I had, the people that inspired me. It built that sense of optimism in me to see, by nature, many of the things that we did in the military were challenging. To see and find the good in things, the positive in things, and carry that, and to share that, because optimism is infectious. If as a leader, you are showing, not the toxic positivity, like everything is just great, because it's not, but that power of optimism, and encouraging your folks to find a way to see it through, and then recognizing that once you make it through, builds optimism in folks. And I still carry that now. The thing that I left behind is that military identity. So another thing that I talk about in the book, that I know you and I have talked about as well, Ian, is that the things that come with our rank and our position. Oftentimes people see on the surface that insignia, they see the title, they see the position, at the expense of who we really are. Jay, the proud husband, the proud father, the outdoor enthusiast, the guy that likes to ride mountain bikes and ski and fish and hike. Those things that the father, the things that built who I am and made me good in those positions that I filled, but often weren't really seen on the surface. So I would say what I've left behind is that chief piece. I understand and appreciate the opportunities I had, the people I was able to connect with, the positions I served in as a chief. But there's so much more to me than that. I just love now being Jay, and not, being Chief France. Even though it's hard to say, because I appreciated and loved what I did, but hopefully that came out in a way that your listeners will connect with.
I love that.
Yeah. It's funny.
I love that.
It's the same thing I mentioned in our episode that we did, episode 1. It's the same thing I asked to leave behind as well. That identity piece. You said it much better than me, Jay. It's the years more of experience that you have with you, I'm sure. But I really appreciate that. And I love that theme. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. That's fantastic. All right. Well, this is the game time.
All right. Here's the,
Now we're here.
Yeah.
We're here to game time. Okay. Now on our last episode, as we mentioned, we told our story. And at the very end, we did 2 truths and a lie, military style. And so I gave mine and Ian gave his.
Okay.
And we're going to reveal now which was the lie for each of us. But first, we're going to let you try to decide. So I'm going to say mine first, and then you can guess. Okay. So mine were: shook the hand of a sitting president, had a one-on-one conversation with the Second Lady of the United States, and testified before a congressional committee on banking. So which is the lie?
One-on-one with the First Lady?
Nope. And it was the Second Lady, but that was true.
Second.
But no, actually, I've never shook the hand of a sitting president. So that was my lie. All right, now it's your turn.
Okay, here are mine. So we're sticking in like the political leader sort of theme here. I have flown with the Vice President of the United States. I have met a king and a queen, and I have sat in a meeting with a sitting prime minister.
Sat in a meeting with a sitting prime minister.
That is correct. You got it. Yes. Absolutely. Well done. Well done.
That was luck, because I know your career path brought you to some incredible opportunities. So all of those I would have believed readily. But yeah.
I appreciate it. Well done. Well done.
Awesome. Okay, so now it is your turn. So you will say your 3, and then on the next episode, we will reveal it to our guests. Yeah. So, all right, your turn.
Okay, and I'll go chronologically, because this is the way I think. I was almost forced to separate after my first enlistment because I received poor evaluations. I almost separated from the Air Force to become a United States Air Marshal. And I almost crossed into the United States Army about midpoint in my career.
Wow. And knowing you and reading your book, wow, I could believe all 3 of these, very much like you said. Okay, well, we'll reveal the answer to our guests on the next episode.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the 2 truths and a lie. We'll reveal, like Ian said, next episode. So I just want to thank you so much, Jay. It has been fantastic to have you here. Again, the book, 5 Million Steps, I'm just going to recommend it to everyone. Spouses, read it too.
Read it.
It's fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yes. And Jay, again, thank you so much, my friend. As you mentioned, it's been almost 20 years since we were stationed together, and I'm repping the old safe side here. So, do that as a nod to where I had the opportunity to first cross paths and work with both you and Monica. Best wishes to you all, and congratulations on your transition, and continue to do great things, my friend. We're all better for you.
Right on. Hey, and thank you all so much for allowing me the privilege and opportunity to come spend some time with you. It's been great, watching you all, continue this transition. No doubt that this passion project that you're on right now is going to do great things for a lot of people. Appreciate the friendship and brotherhood over the years. And hey, look forward to the next time that our paths get to cross. Thank you again so much.
Definitely. Thanks again, Jay. And for everybody out there, we'll see you on the next tour.
The views, opinions, and advice expressed by our guest on the next tour are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast, Ian, Andia, or any affiliated organizations. While we strive to provide helpful and accurate information, this podcast is for informational purposes only. We encourage listeners to consult with professionals or conduct their own research before making any significant decisions related to military transition or post-service life. The content is intended as guidance and personal perspective, not as official advice.